Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Using this opportunity, I would like to talk about educational activity in geopark function, as one of the geopark function. This is one case study or lesson from East Peninsula Geopark. Before starting, I would like, when you want to reconfirm or check the concept of geopark, I would like to strongly recommend you to refer this brochure. UNESCO, this is published from UNESCO. You are able to download the data from UNESCO's website. And sometime I would like to refer to this brochure text during my presentation. Before starting my presentation about the lessons applying in East Peninsula, please let me remind you about educational function in geopark. Geopark's concept is clearly mentioned in this brochure. It shows that the key issue is geopark is a holistic concept of protection, education, and sustainable development. And it will give local people a sense of pride, and it will connect to future sustainability. So the education is one of the key issues in geopark. And there are three major objects of geopark activity. It is so-called three pillars: protection, sustainable development, and education. I will talk about this function. And then, synergy with these three issues, we are able to realize sustainable community through geopark activity. And in this geopark brochure, education function is clearly mentioned in this sentence. It can be summarized that the UNESCO Global Geopark operate educational activities for all ages to spread the awareness of our geological heritage and its link to other aspects of our natural, cultural, and intangible heritage. And also, geopark offer educational program not only for kids but also for education both formal and informal for adults and retired people, while many providing training for local people who can then in turn teach others. So it can realize sustainability. And also educational function is clearly mentioned in Code of Ethics provided by GGN before. GGN mentions that the institutional members, it means each geoparks need to develop strategies towards increasing access to education at all levels. So it mentions the education is not only for kids. The increasing enrollment rates in schools, particularly for female residents, in the respect of human diversity and localism. And also, educational function is clearly mentioned in self-evaluation system. Each global geopark take self-evaluation to revalidation or new recognition. Evaluation system has very much articles. One article is regarding educational activity. So UNESCO requested us to realize these issues: research information and education scientific activities in earth sciences, program operation of environmental education, development of educational materials, publication of information, geological provision for school groups, education of geopark guides, providing information to encourage school group to visit school program provided through the internet. This is the actual activity we should have to conduct as UNESCO Global Geopark. Honestly speaking, I myself is a newcomer in Geopark family, and also moreover, Izu Peninsula is very new designated UNESCO Global Geopark, even though I am able to say these issues only after the participation of intensive course. So I would like to strongly recommend you to participate on Lesbos International Geopark Intensive Course organized by Professor Nicholas. So now I would like to show some lessons in conducting in Izu Peninsula. You see our activity is not only for kids but also all ages. Before talking about, let me remind you that our geopark is designated as UNESCO Global Geopark only 1 month before. So I wish, I don't know, I hope I could present activity as UNESCO Global Geopark, but it is impossible. So this case study had been conducted during we were Japanese domestic geopark. so Japanese domestic geopark is not constrained by UNESCO's concept. So our lesson is not directly reflect UNESCO's concept or idea. So please. You may not accept it in total. Partly you may agree, but partly please disagree and please suggest alternative idea. However, we have, before starting educational participant, we have basic strategies or idea, focal point. Overall focal point of educational activity is the implementation of local development in terms of sustainable development. And this is background, especially in our territory. Young generations are reliable to positive or pride for hometown. They want to go immigrate to Tokyo. Then it's impossible to realize sustainable community. Then we intend through educational activity, we encourage and enhance of pride for local people, not only for young generations, but especially young generations, in terms of enrollment and future leadership in this area. This is actual implementation of ESD. This is a case of a summary of the last year we have conducted inside our geopark. We committed elementary school education, secondary school education, high school education, as well as teachers training. And also we committed to public lectures as well. And these activities, all of these activities are request-based. Then, in other words, request-based, in other words, schools or public people will understand the necessity or significance of geopark. And also, as we conducting other educational activity, we hold science cafe for public people. Talking each other, a kind of workshop, and especially for civil servant training. They should know what is job. Also, public workshop is held frequently. So, using this opportunity, we intend the background of this activity. We always set the clear objectives is building local leadership in various sectors. For example, this is some case study lessons. I'd like to show. This is a case of elementary school activities. We intend, in this stage, we intend experimental-based study. Experimental is base for gaining knowledge, I believe so. And our area is a volcanic ground, so we using various opportunity showing experimental volcanic eruption or how lava flows. Then, as a result, through these experiments, output is guided tour operated by pupils for visitors from outside. We conducted this kind of activity. Then it enhanced hometown knowledge for pupils and encouragement of pride for their hometown. And also this is the implementation on the enrollment in society. And then it enhances their pride for hometown. And then this is a case of secondary school activity. In this stage we intend practice-based study. Practical experiment will be base for knowledge, then more concretely. So before that, in this case, I myself providing a lecture for secondary school students. And then in this case, this is one sample, area photography interpretation practice to know how area was developed. And then this is high school activities. We intend, in this stage, we intend sharing and providing knowledge for various stakeholders. So in this stage, high school students should not only gain the knowledge, but also output for local communities. Then, actually, they conducted guided tour operation and teaching for elementary school students by high school students. Also, in scientific issues, they participated in conference. They provided scientific knowledge. Through these activities, we set a clear target or concept. In the initial stage for elementary school, we encourage for pupils to get pride for hometown. In order to realize this target, we provide area study. And then the knowledge will be getting more concrete. And then finally, in high school stage, the students will not only getting the knowledge, but also sharing the knowledge to local communities. And also, our Izu Peninsula is a land of fury of natural disasters, actually. There are much active volcanoes sometimes erupt. Also, this is an active fault, clear displacement, you see clear displacement, and this faulting activity causes great earthquake in this area, and this faulting activity occurred in submarine environment. Of course, tsunami affects coastal area, so this is an evacuation facility. Also, this our peninsula gathers very much precipitation, more than 4,000 millimeters per year, and sometimes the typhoon also hits the area. Then flood is very, very serious tragedy as well as tsunami disaster. So, considering this natural environment, we intend for all generations education. In the first step, we collected real facts, knowledge from elder people. local community and sharing the knowledge for all the generations. And then we held a workshop, community-based workshop, and in this case we checking the evacuation route, safe evacuation route when some disasters occurred, to make a hazard map or evacuation map. Through this activity, we set concept clearly here once again. The first stage is finding from neighboring nature, and then it will be more concrete knowledge, and finally we are able to take output. And always this process is validate and feedback, and once again. This is sustainability. And during this process, we consider the importance of project-based learning, not only knowledge. Also, it intends enhancement of solution ability in all generations, not only for kids. Then this is the realization of implementation of ESD or SDGs for sustainable communities. And of course, you know what it means. Geopark also required to commit to realize SDGs in this aspect. Considering Geopark activities, lessons for educational activity in Geopark is lessons for quality education or sustainable communities or climate action. We are able to commit for these aspects in SDGs. Just time has come. This is summary. Geopark we believe that Geopark is a holistic concept of protection, education, and sustainable development. And the development of strategies towards increasing access to education and increasing enrollment at all levels, not only for kids. This is an important issue. And giving local people a sense of pride in their hometown. This is very important issue, especially in our territory, especially for young generations. Otherwise, our territory cannot maintain sustainability. And as regards to educational function, implementation of local development in terms of sustainability. And the Geopark involvement in school education is a practical lesson for sustainability, and also implementation of ESD or SDGs for sustainable communities. This is an educational function in Geopark. Thank you. This is all.